Kwaba, welcome to this week's edition of Ghana in Focus. Myself, Kwame, a Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, journalist, historian, podcast and entrepreneur. And in this week's edition of Ghana in Focus is part 2, looking at the review of 2025, looking at areas like illegal small-scale mining, otherwise known as mainstay, looking about health, agriculture, and also the opposition MPP. So that's the theme for this week's edition of Ghana in Focus, review of 2025 part 2, looking at health, education, the opposition MPP, and the illegal small-scale mining. So if you like what you hear, please share it with your friends, family, social media networks, subscribe to Ghana Africa in Focus on YouTube, hit the notification bell, and meaning that every time we upload a new podcast, YouTube notify you of that. We want to get as many subscribers as we can, so please tell your friends, tell your family on YouTube that Ghana and Africa in Focus, this great podcast, is there on YouTube. Similarly, we're also on Spotify, so look out for Ghana Africa in Focus on Spotify. Hit the follow button, meaning that Spotify will notify you every time we upload a new podcast, all right? And let us know your comments. So if you listen to me on Spotify, let me know what you think of the show. If you've got any recommendation that you want me to look into for future shows, let me know. So please let us know what you think about the show and what your comments are, because that'd be good to know what you think about the shows, all right? And if you want to help us to produce more fantastic content from Ghana, from the African continent, you can help us by donating as little as $3 a month. You can do that as a one-off payment or by monthly installment. It's entirely up to you. We do appreciate love your donations in kind. So if you want to make a donation, just hit the donate button on the front of the show. All right. So let's get into the podcast, looking at Ghana in Focus, the year 2025, looking at health, agriculture, illegal small-scale mining called mainstay, and MPP. So let's kick off then with health. So, health is not just about building facilities like clinics, hospitals. It's also about getting the right technology in there, but more importantly, it's also making the population know of their habits and preventive measures that they can use to avoid getting ill. Now, before I say why I say this, there's been a lot of health infrastructure built in the last, definitely under Mahama Part 1, and also under Akufo-Addo 8 years. There are a lot of many clinics and hospitals built. So if you are coming to Ghana on holiday, or if you're going to live in Ghana, I've mentioned before, the state system is getting better. It's better than it was, but it's not near Western standards, but it's getting better than it was 10 years ago. So, for example, Mahama built the University of Ghana Medical School. That is a fantastic facility that can rival anything in Europe or North America. And Akufo-Addo built the Bank of Ghana. No, it wasn't actually Akufo-Addo. It was actually, again, Mahama Part 1. He also built the Bank of Ghana Medical Center in Cantonments. And that's also a first-class medical center. So if you can Google Bank of Ghana Medical Center and also University of Ghana Medical School. You can Google those and you see for yourself the fantastic edifices that were built by John Dramani Mahama Part 1. He also built many local, chief compounds in the regions of Ghana. So likewise, Akufo-Addo had the Agenda 111, building some, clinics, particular clinics in Ghana. And also, let's not forget the Rich Hospital. Again, Rich Hospital is a very, very fantastic hospital with up-to-date equipment. That was again built by John Dramani Mahama Part 1. So Mahama did build a lot of infrastructure. But there's two things on that. So one, like I say, so I have the infrastructure, but two, to this day, Ghana has a problem with infant mortality, yeah, and also maternal mortality. So many Ghanaian women die in giving birth, yeah, just like it's in US, just like it's in UK. So something for me somewhere is wrong, whereby as a country we have not been able to deal with the alarming issue of maternal deaths in Ghana, where our women are dying during pregnancy or after pregnancy, after they've given birth of it. So it is something that the government needs to iron out as part of its healthcare strategy, healthcare policy. Again, when we look at illnesses like prostate cancer, which is a big killer of Black men globally, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the local hospitals, there isn't a prostate cancer screening service whereby men can check their prostate glands to detect if if it is swollen or if it's been inflamed, due to toxins. And even breast screening, is only now being addressed after decades of neglect by various governments. So I believe when in some hospitals in Ghana that they are screening for breast cancer, but more needs to be done in areas like prostate cancer, cancer generally, and other non-communicable diseases that Ghanaians are dying from. And this comes to my point about why health is more than just building great infrastructure and also having these state-of-the-art equipment. What also is not in the discussion about health anywhere in Ghana is the fact that Ghanaians are not living long lives. So our ancestors, this is 1800s, 1700s. My own grandfather lived to 125 years old. Today in Ghana, people are not living nowhere near that. People are dying in Ghana 35, 45, 50, 55, 70, 80, 65. That's not a great age. Like I said, my grandfather, my mother's father lived to 125 years. So what is happening within Ghana that we're dying at a young age? This is what the health minister, the government on another, whoa. The health minister and the government are one and the same thing. So the government, health minister, health practitioners, and also healthcare deliverers rather, have to understand why are Ghanaians dying at young ages. Because 65 is not a big age. 75 is not a big age. Even 80 is not a big age. You're just a baby. In the Bible, if you believe in the Bible, people live to 800 years old, 400 years, 300 years, and we're down at 45, 80, 55. So something somewhere is wrong. And I want to give a couple of pointers too as to why Ghanaians are dying young and what could be done as part of a national health strategy. That's something in Ghana we lack. We lack a coherent national health strategy. In the same way that we've not got a national development plan or a national economic plan like Nkrumah had, the same way we've not got a national coherent health strategy. So let me tell you from my observation why Ghanaians are dying young. And this is part of obesity crisis in Ghana. And next year, I'll go into it more deeper, talking about the obesity crisis that's in Ghana. But for me, there's a couple of things as to why Ghanaians are dying young. One is that a lot of Ghanaians don't do exercise, proper exercise. It's okay doing your walk, 8-minute walk, 9-minute walk, but that's not burning a lot of calories, and it's also not pumping your heart. You got to do proper cardio. You got to run for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not saying do a marathon, but run round the block a couple of times, in your neighborhood. Run at least twice a week. Also, so those cardiovascular activities, it pumps up your heart, because your heart is the engine of the body. Just like a car, or just like an engine is the engine of the car. So if that engine, if the engine is messed up, the car will not work. So if your heart is not pumping, as it should be, that creates heart problems, and that creates things like death, strokes. Yeah. So your heart is very, very important. And this is why in Ghana there's a problem with cardiovascular diseases, because we're not doing cardiovascular exercises, yeah, by protecting your health, by protecting your heart. Now, another thing, and I'll go into this deeply, next year when I touch on the obesity crisis, is that the foods that Ghanaians are eating and the oils that they're using. For me, this is a big, big, big issue in Ghana, the kind of food that we're eating, and also the oils that we're using to prepare these foods that we're eating, yeah? For me, it's a massive issue, and it's contributing to the early grave of many, many Ghanaians. And the government needs to have a policy framework whereby it encourages healthy eating among Ghanaians. Even in the UK, there was a policy framework whereby people were encouraged to eat 5 pieces of fruit a day. 5 a day. 5 greens, 5 vegetables a day, 5 fruit a day. Yeah. In Ghana, I don't know of any policy that pertains to eat 5 pieces of fruit a day. Yeah. So this is why I'm saying that Ghana, yeah, the Ministry of Health, the government of Ghana needs a coherent national health framework in order to instill in Ghanaians healthy lifestyle, healthy habits, healthy living. Yeah. Because you cannot create a nation with sick people. You have to create a nation building with healthy people. So it's incumbent on the government, via the Ministry of Health, to come up with a national policy, a national framework that will begin to tackle some of these issues that are facing Ghanaians, which is why Ghanaians are dying very, very early. 50, 55, 60, 70. That's not a great age. So, in terms of health, like I said, there needs to be a national coordinated framework whereby Ghanaians are encouraged to live healthy, exercise a lot, and also, engage in healthy lifestyles as opposed to the lifestyles that many Ghanaians are on now, which includes drinking too much, smoking, particularly men, and also, the obesity time bomb, that is a ticking time bomb in Ghana. So that's my stance on health. So it needs to be a national framework of conduct. And it's something that's lacking so far from what I've seen in this government. So let's look into the second issue, which is agriculture. So agriculture is the mainstay of a country like Ghana, which is an agrarian society. Ghana is like any African country, is rich, blessed with fertile land that can grow anything. So under the last government, NPP, they had a policy in terms of agriculture called planting for fish and jobs. Very, very wonderful idea, very great initiative. However, the implementation and the outcome of that planting and fish and job was such that it did not do great benefit that they could have done. What do I mean by that? So right now in Ghana, and it's been going on for the past sort of 5-7 years, food has become very, very expensive in Ghana, which is why at one point, yeah, many families in Ghana could not afford 3 square meals a day because of food inflation in Ghana and food being very, very high. Yeah. 2, a lot of Ghanaian farmers annually destroy their crops, whether it's onion, tomato, fruit, vegetables, etc., because lack of storage facilities, lack of silos. And thirdly, a lot of the farmers are not getting markets in which they can sell their produce. So these 3 things have compounded to make Ghana, the food inflation in Ghana very, very high, which is why despite the favorable interest rate, the favorable inflation in Ghana, the favorable stability of the city, food inflation is still high in Ghana because we do not grow what we eat and we don't eat what we grow. So essentially, what I'm saying is that, had the Planting for Food and Jobs been a success, been implemented properly, food inflation in Ghana would not be as high as it is today. Yeah. And Ghanaian farmers will not be throwing food away because they've got no silos and no storage facilities, particularly when it's off season. Yeah. And also they would have market in which to sell their produce. So right now, the current government under John Mahama has got a food or initiative called Eat Ghana. So what I take from that is that Ghana must produce what it consumes and consumes what it produces. And this is but this is the big thing on this issue here, right? What we must do in Ghana to make this policy thrive and to make it work is that the government must subsidize its farmers. The same way that farmers are subsidized in America, in the European Union, under the Common Agricultural Policy, in India, in China, in Vietnam, in Japan, all these places I've mentioned, farmers are subsidized by the state. This is why they're able to import food stuff into Africa cheaper than local farmers are producing it. Because local farmers in Ghana are not subsidized, but they're competing with farmers in Asia, farmers in North America, farmers in Europe, who are heavily subsidized by the taxpayers in those territories. Yeah. This is why, for example, imported rice from Vietnam or China is cheaper than the rice that is locally produced, locally grown in Ghana. And this is why many Ghanaians are buying the so-called perfume rice, Thai rice, Vietnam rice, China rice, than they are doing local Ghanaian rice, because it is cheaper, because of these subsidies that Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian farmers get. So now, if we're going to compete with these farmers, with these farmers in Asia, particularly Asia, and North America and Europe, and to make sense of Eat Ghana, i.e. eat what we grow what we eat, then the government has got to subsidize farmers. And this is why I was against, I'm not against women's empowerment, but I was against the initiative of a women's bank, and particularly plowing a whopping 400 million Ghanaian cedis into this women's development bank. 400 million cedis is roughly about $40 million US. Now just imagine what $40 million could do by giving that as soft loans, or by subsidizing, or by interest-free loans to Ghanaian farmers. Yeah, Ghanaian rice farmers, Ghanaian tomato farmers, Ghanaian cassava farmers, even Ghanaian cocoa farmers. Yeah, just imagine if that money was put into subsidizing or giving soft loans or interest-free loans to our farmers. Our farmers could produce enough food to feed Ghana. And then we could export some, not necessarily to Asia or Europe, right? Potentially Europe, but we could export our surplus to other African nations. Yeah? Just like we did in Nkrumah's time. Under Nkrumah, Ghana was the exporter of food. After Nkrumah, when we neglected our farmers, Ghana has become a net importer of food that we can grow in Ghana. And so, as part of the government's Eat Ghana policy, for me, the government must either subsidize our farmers or give them soft loans or give them interest-free loans. That will enable them to have the peace of mind to grow food that we need in Ghana. So for rice, rather than importing rice from India, from China, from Vietnam, we grow local rice. Yeah, we grow Ghanaian rice. And by the way, the Ghanaian red rice and brown rice, and to an extent the white rice, is more healthier, yeah, than the rice that comes from India, China, even I heard that, the other day Pakistan, talking about Pakistan want to sell us rice, yeah? And we're going to Pakistan to learn rice technology. Our rice in Ghana, our indigenous rice is better than Pakistan rice, yeah? So rather than give farmers in Pakistan, in India, in China, in Vietnam, in the US, job by importing their rice, we can create jobs for our own farmers who can then create jobs, in terms, secondary jobs in terms of warehousing, in terms of employing locals to be farmers, cultivators, to be drivers of, of the box rice, to store the rice, etc. We can create jobs for ourselves. Yeah. And then secondary, what the government can also do, yeah, is to engage with private partnerships in Ghana. There are very, very wealthy men, women, and entrepreneurs in Ghana, like Richard Ni Amakwe. He's the Ghanaian that has the franchise for Burger King Ghana. Yeah, this man, he's just about 40 years old, but he's a successful Ghanaian indigenous businessman. Yeah, he's also the owner of Bill's microfinance credit scheme. Yeah, whereby you can get credit for your business. And this man's business alone has invested in Ghanaian startups in fintech, agriculture, etc., over SMEs. So why doesn't government have a partnership with Ghanaian entrepreneurs like Richard Ni Amakwe, the owner of Burger King franchise in Ghana, to ensure that our farmers get a market? And this is another thing that our farmers are crying about. They're not getting a market. Again, you see, under the school feeding program, and this is where you can begin to fashion the taste of the future generation, right? The young children, 4, 5, 6, 13, 14, are part of the school feeding program, not the adults, because the adults have virtually made up their mind in terms of their tastes. So their taste is for foreign rice, India, Chinese, Vietnam rice. But if the government had a plan to Ghanaianize the school feeding program, what do I mean by that? So all the rice dishes, all the banku dishes, all the fermented corn dishes, and the stews that go with rice, the okra stew that go with banku, the fish and the peppers, the shito that go with the kenki. All that should be produced by Ghanaian farmers. So the Ghanaian rice farmer can supply rice to every school, every tertiary school in Ghana under the school feeding program. Yeah, that's how farmers can get a market, and that's how farmers can actually get capital because they've got a market to sell their goods. Yeah, and then reinvest some of that profit into developing their businesses on a larger scale, scaling it up. Yeah, so this is what government can do in order for our farmers to get market from the food that they produce. So it's a win-win, because if you are subsidizing the farmers, yeah, and then you give them a market, i.e. school feeding program, every school in Ghana buys Ghanaian, made in Ghana rice. Every school in Ghana, when they're preparing the stew, the cooks are preparing the stew or the soup, they buy made in Ghana tomatoes, made in Ghana onions, made in Ghana millet, made in Ghana maize. You understand? Yeah. So the money that is generated from the school feeding program goes back to the government, goes back to the farmers, and then they can reinvest the money into creating more factories and so what have you. So that's how an initiative like Eat Ghana can work. So when we cultivate the minds and orientate the minds of our young people, under 13, under 15, to eat Ghanaian rice, to eat, to prepare jollof rice with made in Ghana tomatoes, made in Ghana onions, made in Ghana spices, then by the time that they become wives or have families of their own, they will buy made in Ghana rice as opposed to buying made in China, made in Vietnam, made India rice. You see the domino effect of that? So it's incumbent, it is imperative that this Eat Ghana program subsidizes our farmers or gives them soft loans. B, give them market to sell their produce, i.e., the school feeding program, and also every government initiative, right? So if the government of Ghana is doing a program, say that they invited the president of Malawi or the president of the EU to come to Ghana, that function, that banquet at that function should be made in Ghana food, yeah? And then that's how you build a sector agriculture. And then you encourage the local Ghanaians to buy made in Ghana produce. Yeah, we're not saying don't buy made in India rice, but there's an option now. You have no options now. Yeah, buy made in Ghana rice. Yeah, and what we also do that also by putting import duty, yeah, on imported rice and imported, foodstuffs, so that it doesn't compete with our farmers. Yeah, and we also provide silos and storage units for our farmers, whereby if, for example, if a mango grower or orange grower, is looking for storage facilities after a season, they can use these facilities rather than let the oranges or let the mangoes rot in the bush, and then the farmer making losses. So this is ways and means as to how the Eat Ghana initiative can be a success if it's implemented properly, unlike pending food and jobs that the NPP did, that was not implemented properly. And so I welcome the Eat Ghana initiatives that NDC is doing, but it needs to follow the measures that I've highlighted in order for Eat Ghana to be a success and for Eat Ghana to mean something in terms of nation building in Ghana. All right. So that's my, take on agriculture in Ghana. We've got to grow what we eat what we grow, and put tariffs on these imported goods so that our farmers can, not be affected by cheap imports coming to Ghana. Because, I bet you any money, if I was a Ghanaian farmer and I wanted to sell my rice in India, they'll put big tariff on that to protect Indian rice farmers. So why are we doing the same in Ghana? Protect our farmers by slapping tariff, right, on import food coming to Ghana, because it is criminal that we are importing rice, importing cassava from China, importing chicken from the Netherlands and America, importing tomatoes, importing onions. It's criminal, whereby we can do ourselves. So even the poultry industry, again, in Ghana, we could create our own poultry industry by importing chicken from other countries, which is probably not good for us. We could create our own homegrown organic chicken. Yeah. And again, that came part of the school feeding program, that to provide a protein for our children, right? The chicken is Ghana made. Yeah. So I hope you understand my logic and my mindset behind government's Eat Ghana program as to how they can get it up and how they can make it beneficial for Ghana and Ghanaians. Now I move on to mainstay or illegal mining. Now, illegal mining, like I mentioned before, is basically killing Ghana. It's a silent killer. Yeah. So under the NPP, 8 years, this illegal small-scale mining, mainstay, it became a national issue. Our journalists in Ghana, like Erastus Asaridonko of Multimedia, and also Captain Smart of Multimedia, they did a lot of, documentaries, particularly Erastus, into the damaging of small-scale mining in the last 8 years. So all the main water bodies in Ghana, with Apra, Ankobia, Ofing, yeah, most of the rivers in Ghana have been polluted because of the toxic metal effects of cyanide, of lead and mercury that is seeping into the ground and that's going into the rivers. Yeah, and so under the 8 years of NPP and the Kufado, they could not destroy this cancer, yeah, this eco-terrorism called illegal small-scale mining, where people, not to mention any names, but people were mining without licenses or without the proper documentation, but saying I got this concession, that concession. And there's one famous case about which I won't go into right now, of one bigwig, yeah, who had a mining company and was mining illegally or mining without concession, yeah. But because that person was politically aligned at the time, that person was not dealt with by the government at the time. And so many people who were involved in illegal small-scale mining, I'm saying, you know, got off the hook, license to roam, and because of that, destroyed Ghana water bodies. And for me, the biggest culprits were the Chinese. How can you allow a Chinese into your country, yeah, and mine gold, and at the same time destroy your water body, your environment, and your rivers? Hmm? Do you think you, as a Ghanaian, can go to China and do coal mining? Because China got a lot of coal. You think you can go to China and dig up their reserve and dig for coal? You think you can mine for coal as a Ghanaian, as African in China? No, you can't. Because they're protective of the industries. So why the hell have we allowed the Chinese, particularly Chinese, yeah? They're the big one because they've got the machinery, or rather they've got the capital. Then they've got the machinery. And then and obviously they've got the finance, yeah, to facilitate to large scale, small, illegal scale mining. Why are we allowed that? Is it because we don't think long term? We don't think of our future? We think of the here and now? Or that we're damn greedy as Ghanaians? Too greedy. Yeah? And you see now, because of this illegal small scale mining, particularly in the mining communities, children are being born with no eyes, children being born with no limbs, children being born with no penis, no vagina, no ears. This is because the people who made that child, who produced that child, are drinking contaminated water because the water in these mining communities has been polluted because of mercury, cyanide, and and what's the other one? Lead, poison our rivers, poison our water bodies, and people in the villages are drinking dirty, stinking, polluted water that is going to their bloodstream and causing, children that have been born deformed. Yeah? And even now, under the NDC, it's nearly 1 year since they came to power. Gamsay have not changed. They've not been able to curtail Gamsay. Even though they talk that they've got this task force. I mean, under NPP was called Operation Vanguard. I don't know what it's called under this government, but there's another operation in place. We know also, right, that there's sub-kings. I hate that word chief, because that chief is a European term that they use to denigrate our kingship. So I say sub-kings, not chief, sub-kings. So you know that there's sub-kings, yeah, even some kings in some areas, and even some police and some big people who are Ghanaians are involved not only in the facilitating of the small-scale mining that's illegal, but also helping the Chinese get land in mining areas, in Asante, in Eastern region, in Western region, in Central region to mine gold. Also in Bono and Nahafa region. And we know that just as the last government, there are some bigwigs in the current government of the NDC who are engaged in illegal small-scale mining, which is why the current government as yet cannot do anything about it, because you'll be arresting your own people. Just like the last government could not do anything about it because most of their people were involved in small-scale mining. So we know that they are members of the ruling elite, members of the current political party in power that are doing illegal small-scale mining, which is why calls for state of emergency so far have been, refused by the county government. But, if this year coming, 2026, if the government does not issue a state of emergency, then we know that they are complicit in this illegal small-scale mining. Because this is terrorism, eco-terrorism, the destruction of our lands, destruction of our rivers, destruction of our water body. That is eco-terrorism. The destruction of our environment. That is eco-terrorism. That is terrorism. That is killing, sucking the lifeblood of the people, which is resulting in newborn babies being born, like I said, with no vagina, no penis. And you don't want to institute a state of emergency? This is an emergency, beloved. This is terrorism. What did America do in the aftermath of 9/11? So in Ghana, if the government is serious about, for me, eliminating illegal small-scale mining, it should constitute, right? I'm getting in place of the legal framework for it, a state of emergency. Because right now in Ghana, 90% of the water bodies are polluted. And this is why you in Ghana, this is why sometimes the water is intermittent. Because the Ghana Water Authority or company, because of the pollution in the water, right, they have to use chemicals more, they have to use more chemicals to clean the water. And because of the pollution and toxic nature of the river bodies, right, it is causing, big cities in Accra, Kumasi, Tema, to have, water for part of the day. Because it's intermittent water, because next thing you hear, right, Ghana Water Company got to do some work on the water. Yeah? Ghana Water Company got to do this, got to do that. Why? Because of the effects of illegal small-scale mining. So I'm saying to our government, if by this time next year, there's no state of emergency, it means the government is complicit in illegal small-scale mining and is protecting its own people. So that's what I'll say about that. It is an emergency. It is eco-terrorism. Our land, our river, our waters have been destroyed, and something needs to be done about it. Ghanaians in Ghana, you need to wake up, demonstrate, protest to your local assembly, to your MP, to regional minister, and even to the president, that this thing cannot wait another year for it to be done. Because the longer this thing goes on, the water that you're bathing with, is polluted. The water that you're having a shower with, that you're having a bath with, is polluted. Even the pure water that we're drinking, where's it coming from? So you can't use bottled water, imported bottled water, to bathe, to cook, whatever can you? And I hear now, particularly in light of Erastus Asai-Donko's report, that if this thing continues, right, Ghana will be importing water by 2030. That's just over 4 years' time. Is that what we want in Ghana? I'll leave it there. Now, the last issue is the MPP opposition. MPP suffered a massive historic defeat a year ago in the elections. But they've not, for me, made a deep retrospective look and analysis as to why they lost the election. I even hear, I think it's someone like Katie Hammond, who was the member for, it was MP for, I think Adansit, part of the Asante region, right? That MPP handed over power to the NDC. Isn't that an insult? You see, and the MPP don't want to really admit why they lost the election. And you've not done that deep introspective reflection as to why you lost and how you lost. And you're thinking your arrogance or your myopic thinking that you're going to get elected in 2028. I don't think so, beloved. I don't think so. If I was MPP, forget 28. Because we in Ghana, we lived in Ghana last 8 years. before January 25, when Mohammed came in. We saw the damage that you did NPP. Interest rates peaking at 30%, 35%. Inflation peaked at 54%. The dollar, city dollar, was at one time 17 to a dollar. Yeah. At one time, it was even 20 cedis to a pound. We ain't forgotten that, you know. We haven't also forgotten the domestic debt exchange program. The first time in Ghana's history that Ghana, country like Ghana, had to not only get a bailout, but also to use public money from pensioners, from investors to pay back creditors under the so-called domestic debt program, domestic debt exchange program. You think we forgot that? You think we forgot how MPP destroyed the economy of Ghana? They had to run to the IMF to get a bailout, 2023. You think we forgot about that? You think about how you neglected the healthcare sector that was exposed during COVID? And if it wasn't for the World Health Organization, right, many Ghanaians would have died during COVID because Ghana was ill-prepared for COVID. But because we got money from the World Health Organization, right, many lives were saved in Ghana. Yeah? So do you think with all that happened over the last 8 years, that any right-minded thinking Ghanaian will vote NPP in 2028? I don't think so, beloved. And we know that they're having their primaries to elect the flag bearer who will contest the 2028 election, I believe in January next year. Yeah, so obviously we're in December right now, so January is just a week away. So in January 2026, NPP are going to elect their flag bearer to see who would be the party's nomination to contest 2020 election. And by all indicators, the former vice president and presidential candidate, Dr. Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia, appears to be the favorite. Overrunners include General Acheampong and also General Acheampong. So, but it appears like, you know, NPP are going to vote for Mahmoud Bawumia. But for me, it doesn't matter who they put because, like I said, NPP have got no fresh policy. What policies have you got? Yeah, that you can convince Ghanaians to vote in 2028. You got nothing, beloved. I don't think you got any policy. What's the policy on health? What's the policy on education? You know, what's the policy on the economy? We know we did the economy, right? The economy is much better now than when it was when you left office. So what are you going to do different from what this government is doing? So for me, NPP need to really go out into the country, take a deep look at what went wrong, how it went wrong, why we lost 2028, and then come back to the Ghanaian electorate with fresh, innovative policies. That is different from what they were when they were in power between 2016 and 2024. So, you know, for me, in my wrapping up of the NPP, that for me, they have to do a more deeper retrospection of why they lost the election last year. And that for me, they've got nothing to offer the Ghanaian public in terms of making a comeback in 2028 because, you know, for me, 4 years is not long time to do a deep reflection, let alone have fresh policies that are going to, you know, make Ghanaians more richer, yeah, and more prosperous, yeah. So, you know, that's that on the NPP, and that brings to an end this edition of Ghana in Focus special, looking at 2025 Part 2, looking about the opposition, NPP, looking at health, agriculture, and also illegal small-scale mining. Like what you hear, please share to your friends, family, social media networks. Please subscribe to Ghana African Focus on YouTube. Hit the bell, meaning that YouTube will notify you when we upload. Again, look out for Ghana African Focus on Spotify. Hit the follow button. meaning that Spotify will notify you when we upload new podcasts. Please let us have your comments. So particularly if you're listening to me on Spotify or on the main Buzzsprout website, Ghanaian Focus website, please leave your comments. We'd love to know what you think about the show, and we'd love to know what you would like as future topics. All right, so next week, we're going to look at the year in Africa, 2025, particularly looking about Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, etc. Look out for that. So for myself, Kwame, and from all the crew here on Ghana in Focus, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in the next edition of Ghana Africa in Focus.